Thank you to Minister Eamon Ryan, been with us here today. Minister, we've talked numerous times, I know, on many of the projects, particularly around Galway, and of course our campaign, I suppose I would have been involved in very locally as well, around the Galway to Dublin cycleway. And of course that bridge is now getting built, as we were mentioning, just literally over Athlone. It's fantastic. It's absolutely amazing. It's 3 pieces of infrastructure, I think, and they brought them over, and it was further down the Shannon, and basically that's been set up now. And it just shows the importance, because when you're in Athlone, it's people who are walking and bringing their prams and out on their bikes. But I was amazed at how many pedestrians are using it, and it just shows you the importance of infrastructure for the likes of, say, the town of Ballinasloe, where we don't even have a park, where there's no safe places to go, where you're off-road and away from cars. So that's an absolutely amazing project, and I suppose it will be the timelines around that. So I don't know if there's anything you might be able to comment on just around TII's focus around the timelines and delivery of that project. But I know for our project team that are based in Ballinasloe, like, we're looking at that, hopefully, 25, 26, that we're going to see construction. Please God it gets through on board Pleanála. Minister, it is wonderful to see this bill. You've put a lot into it. It's tackling a lot of different areas under roads, particularly around e-scooters and e-bikes, and great to have the legislation there that it can be regulated, because obviously in the city centres it's a real challenge with e-scooters. Around e-bikes, great, I think fantastic. I don't have one myself, but great to see that it's getting so popular and that we'll be able to use them on cycleways and greenways. Also, Minister, I suppose around the active travel, that potentially, I don't know your future plans maybe, but around local authorities being able to invest in more regional cycleways and greenways, to connect. Once we have our Galway to Athlone cycleway, that'll be our major world-class piece of infrastructure, but perhaps how our local authorities will be able to link in with more regional, maybe not of the same standard, but that they'll be able to link in with this particular infrastructure in 4 to 5 years' time. The antisocial use of scramblers, I know in Limerick City that is a real issue in certain regions and areas, and I think in a lot of city centres. Great to see that the guards will now have the powers to seize those vehicles. Minister, just in general, I suppose, and on some of the points, and I know some of the other senators have raised as well, the areas around TII and road safety, I know that some of the areas here in this bill are looking at giving additional powers around penalty points and maybe additional powers to guards. But also, I suppose, again, I'm coming back to local authorities' investment in safety and road safety in rural areas. We have junctions where you have major roads coming onto minor roads and cars flying through it. And the local authorities are at a challenge in having maybe the right resources. They're looking at engaging with consultants around safety on these roads, and yet the consultant costs alone are massive. So where we fought, for example, on a particular junction in our area, we got funding for road safety measures. The actual cost of bringing in consultants to look at maybe a more long-term, better solution was not able to happen, because the consultant costs were over the costs that have been allocated for this particular road safety measure in the first place. So is there anything that can be looked at there? If we're looking at saying to local authorities, you need to engage with consultants to look at road safety in rural areas or whatever area it is, can we factor that in if we're going to be allowing them funding for particular dangerous sections of road? And this is where there have been accidents on this particular section of road. Speed limits. You've mentioned here speed limits, variable nature, and particularly I think you look at the M50, but I suppose what I'm looking at here is speed limits and maybe variable nature for outside of town areas and villages. And this is where you have clubs like football clubs, GAA clubs, or the rugby club, like for example in our town, the rugby club is outside. I'm trying to look at, can you get a footpath to connect from the town to the rugby club so people can go to training. The challenge is that the safety, the 50k zone is before. Now it's only maybe 2 to 3 kilometres outside. The 50k zone is before. So the local authority will not look at doing that where the 50k zone is within the speed limits. So is there anything that can be looked at there for the variable speed limits if we're looking at clubs, particularly around where children would be going to, or families would be going to, and to encourage cycling and walking? I suppose some of the other challenging areas where I've done campaigns around is Connecting Ireland. And again, this is, you'll be aware, we've done an awful lot around school transport. It's been a very big issue for me particularly, and we've looked at this within Fine Gael as well. But the capacity around buses and public transport. And I've heard my colleague here, Senator O'Reilly, speaking about other options. But the only option we have in many areas is where you're using buses, and they go on roads. And until there's another option for buses, because we don't have train tracks, we have to understand that we do need access to good roads in these areas. But just particularly around Connecting Ireland, is there an update on maybe the options for buses that we had coming from that programme? We did a big campaign on it. It was last December. We're still waiting to see maybe the outcome from those reports. And on bus airing capacity, Galway seemingly is a big issue, according to bus airing under the school transport section for Galway. I know this comes under the Department of Education. I'm a spokesperson on education. But Minister, is there anything we can look at here? There seems to be budget that the Minister has to allocate towards school transport. If they're coming back and bus airing is saying it's capacity issues, is it around the buses? I'm not familiar with all the challenges here, but is there anything that we can do in regards to that? Because it's encouraging people in rural areas, Minister, to actually use public transport. And just eventually, obviously, I have very different views on the Galway Ring Road, only because I've lived in Galway, worked in Galway, but I really do believe that we need to be able to encourage public access on buses, and in order to do that, it's not a case of putting at a bus stop where there's no bus shelter or cover, which is the case in so many areas around the county, and then suddenly you're waiting an hour because the bus is stuck in traffic and there's no chance of having a better road to get people from A to B. So, Garmil Mahagat, thank you.